My name is Olivia Reyes, and I watched my son steal right in front of me like a stranger with my face. Trust me, you'll regret skipping this story. So before you sit back and listen, take a moment to like the video and subscribe to Grace's Truth. Now get in the mood to listen to this story because it might be the most shocking moment of parenthood you'll ever hear. The moment I saw his hand slip into the hoodie, my stomach dropped. We were standing in the electronics aisle of a crowded mall store. Phones, chargers, gadgets, all neatly displayed beneath fluorescent lighting that made everyone look pale and guilty. I'd walked ahead to check the price of a portable speaker on sale, only half watching him. I didn't expect to need to watch him. He was 17, smart, quiet. A little withdrawn lately, sure, but I'd chalk that up to hormones, midterms, the usual teenage ice. But then I turned around. And I saw him take the phone case, something shiny, expensive looking, and slide it quickly into the pocket of his hoodie. Like he'd done it before. Like it was nothing. I didn't move. The air around me slowed, warped, as though I were watching it underwater. He didn't know I saw. He was pretending to read the price tag on a row of headphones, his shoulders just a little too tight, his breathing shallow. For a second I thought maybe I was wrong, that he'd picked it up to look at it, maybe forgot it was still in his hand. But no, he'd pocketed it. Deliberately. And now I was standing 6 feet away from my own son, the boy I'd raised on bedtime stories and code of honor speeches, watching him become a thief. What hit me first wasn't anger. It was shame. Not at him, at myself. What had I missed? Where had the ground shifted beneath us without me noticing? I've been a school counselor for 12 years. I've sat across from boys just like Evan, boys who slipped into trouble quietly. Boys whose mothers told me with trembling hands, he wasn't always like this, and I always believed them. Now I was one of them. A security guard turned the corner at the end of the aisle. Middle-aged, bored, half watching a couple of teenagers by the Bluetooth speakers. I snapped out of it. I stepped between the guard's line of sight and Evan. I walked directly toward my son. He looked up, startled eyes wide like he knew. I leaned in, voice low but steady. Put it back. His face drained of color. He didn't argue, didn't speak. Just slipped the case from his hoodie pocket and placed it on the nearest shelf, nowhere near where he'd taken it from. I took his wrist gently but firmly. Let's go. We walked out without buying anything. Not a word passed between us as we crossed the food court. The mall noise blurred around me, shoes squeaking, laughter echoing from the arcade, the drone of pop music from a clothing store. None of it reached me. Evan was quiet. Too quiet. I didn't ask him why. Not yet. Because I knew that asking too soon, asking when the walls were still up, and the shame still fresh, would only push him deeper into silence. We got to the parking lot. I unlocked the car. We both got in. I turned the engine, let the AC hum, stared straight ahead at the windshield. I saw you. He didn't respond. I saw what you did. Still nothing. Do you want to explain? His voice came low, choked. No. That broke something in me. Not his refusal, but the finality in that one word. Like he'd already decided I didn't deserve to know. Like I was the enemy now. I turned off the car. I need you to understand something, Evan, I said, my voice shaking more than I wanted it to. That wasn't just shoplifting. That was trust breaking. And not just between you and me. Still no response. I tried again. Do you know what could have happened if that guard saw you? He looked out the window. Finally he spoke. Doesn't matter. I slammed my hand on the steering wheel. Of course it matters. You could have been arrested, expelled. I could have lost my job. Silence. He didn't flinch. Didn't fight back. Just sat there staring out the window like the world outside was safer than what I had to say. And then something shifted in me. I saw the tightness in his jaw, the way he kept swallowing but never turned his head. This wasn't defiance. This was fear, not of me, of himself. And I suddenly realized I wasn't dealing with a rebellious kid. I was dealing with a boy on the edge of becoming someone he didn't recognize. And I didn't know if I could pull him back. That night I couldn't sleep. Every time I closed my eyes, I saw his hand slipping the case into his hoodie. Not sneaky, not greedy, just desperate, like he needed to do it. And I kept asking myself why. Why would my son, my kind, introverted, almost too good son, risk everything? And why now? The next morning, I got a phone call that made everything worse. It was from the mall. More specifically, from mall security. "We're not pressing charges," the voice said. "We saw the footage." He put it back. "Consider this a warning." I breathed out. But then the voice continued. "We had to log it for insurance reasons, though. That includes his name. It's in the system now. If anyone inquires, say an employer, a school board." My throat closed. "I understand," I said quietly. I hung up and stared at my reflection in the black screen of my phone. A mother, a counselor, a woman who thought she knew the boy she raised. Now, I wasn't sure who he was. But worse, I wasn't sure who I was anymore either. The silence between us after the mall stayed in the house like smoke after a fire. Evan barely spoke. I didn't press. We were both too raw, both pretending that nothing had happened when everything had. He retreated to his room like it was a bunker, and I let him. Not because I believed that ignoring it would make it better, but because I didn't trust myself to say the right thing yet. And that morning, I found myself sitting at the kitchen table staring at a half-drunk cup of coffee and one question that wouldn't leave my head. What if this is just the beginning? At work, I played my part. School counselor, calm voice, firm eye contact, nodding wisely while talking to troubled students whose issues felt suddenly more familiar. But I wasn't fine, and it didn't take long for the cracks to show. That afternoon, during a routine meeting with the assistant principal, I saw her glance at me a little too long. The pause before she spoke, the forced brightness in her tone. Something was off. Then she said it. I heard, "Something happened at West Mall over the weekend." I kept my face still, neutral. "Oh." She leaned in, hands folded. "Nothing official, just chatter. Something about your son and security footage." I wanted to disappear. I smiled the professional kind and said, "Yes, we're addressing it as a family." She nodded like she respected that, but her eyes didn't match her mouth. It spread faster than I expected. By the next day, one of the math teachers, someone I'd had coffee with every Friday for 3 years, avoided me in the faculty lounge. A parent scheduled and then canceled a counseling session for her daughter. When I passed two juniors in the hallway, they went quiet mid-conversation and gave each other a look that said everything. I wasn't just Olivia the counselor anymore. I was Olivia, the mother of the shoplifter. I wanted to believe people would be more understanding, that I'd earned grace from years of helping their kids, calming their storms. But the truth, no one cares how many students you saved when they think you've failed your own. That night, I sat outside on the porch wrapped in a sweater, staring at the moon and thinking, what if this is the moment everything turns? Not just my job, not just Evan, but me. The next morning, I decided to say something. He came down for breakfast, hoodie up, headphones in. I took a breath. "Evan." He didn't look at me. I tried again. "We need to talk." Nothing. I reached out lightly, tapped his elbow. He flinched barely, but enough. That hurt more than I want to admit. "I'm not going to yell," I said. "I'm not here to punish you. I just need to understand." Finally, he pulled one earbud out. "What's there to understand?" "That moment," I said, "when you took it. What were you thinking?" He shrugged. "Nothing." I stayed quiet. He sighed. "You wouldn't get it." I leaned in softer now. "Try me." He looked up, and for the first time since the incident, I saw something in his eyes that wasn't avoidance. It was exhaustion. He whispered, "I didn't mean to do it. I didn't plan it. It just happened." I waited. He didn't continue. I didn't push, because this wasn't just about the shoplifting. It was about the storm underneath it. I went to bed early that night. Not because I was tired, but because I was empty. But around 2 a.m., I heard something. Soft footsteps, a door creaking open. I got up, walked into the hall. Evan was in the kitchen drinking water straight from the faucet like he used to when he was little and afraid of waking me. I didn't say anything. He turned, saw me, and froze. Then he said something I'll never forget. I didn't want to be him. My breath caught. "Who?" He looked down. "Dad." It hit me like a gut punch. Of course. Of course that shadow still hung over him. The father who disappeared after stealing from coworkers, forging documents, leaving behind court dates and handcuffs. The man I spent years cleaning out of our lives, photos, burned memories, buried therapy, attended like rituals. But DNA doesn't lie. And when Evan slipped that phone case into his pocket, maybe what scared him most wasn't getting caught. Maybe it was recognizing himself. I walked to him slowly, put my hand on his shoulder. "You are not him," I said softly. His voice cracked. "But what if I am?" "You're not," I repeated. "You're here. You're ashamed. You care. That alone makes you different." And then, for the first time in years, he let me hug him. A real hug. Like he was trying to hold on to something before it slipped away. The next morning, I got a call from the mall again. Different voice this time. The store manager. "We're not pursuing anything," she said. "But you should know. A few people saw it. Your son. They've been talking." I closed my eyes. It wasn't just going to be whispers now. It was going to be noise. And I realized something. I couldn't protect him anymore. But I could hold him accountable. And maybe help him find his way out of the shadow before it swallowed him whole. When your child is born, you memorize their face like scripture. The slope of their nose, the shade of their eyes, the sound they make when they sleep. You think you'll always recognize them, not just their body, but their soul. But one day you look across the dinner table at your 17-year-old son, and you realize you don't know who's sitting there anymore. Evan didn't talk much after that night. We'd shared that late-night moment, that fragile admission about his father, but instead of opening a door between us, it felt like he'd thrown a blanket over the truth and quietly walked away again. Every conversation felt like walking across a frozen lake, careful, calculated, afraid that if I stepped too hard, everything would crack. I noticed things. He ate less. He started locking his door. He stayed up late, earbuds and staring at his phone like it was a lifeline. But he never smiled. Not like before. I remember the way he used to be. When he was little, he had this laugh, unfiltered, explosive. He used to curl up beside me on the couch with his science books, peppering me with facts about space and frogs and the water cycle. Back then I was Mama, not Mom. Definitely not Olivia. And certainly not this woman he couldn't make eye contact with. He left for school without saying goodbye. I watched from the front window, my coffee cooling in my hand. He didn't look back, didn't wave. Just walked to the bus stop with his hood up and his hands in his pockets, carrying whatever weight he was too proud to show me. And I kept thinking, when did we stop being a team? At school, I found myself replaying the footage I never saw. The shoplifting moment burned into my brain like a fever dream. I didn't need the actual video. I'd already memorized it. What if this wasn't the first time? What if this was just the first time I caught him? And what if, worse, he didn't feel bad at all? After work, I sat in the car outside the house for 15 minutes before going in. Not because I was afraid, because I didn't know what to be when I walked through that door. Mother, disciplinarian, detective, failure. He was in his room when I came in. Door closed, no sound. I walked past it and paused, hand raised, about to knock. But I didn't. Because something in me knew this wasn't a knock and talk kind of situation. This needed space. But it also needed boundaries. That night, I left a note under his door. Not a dramatic one. Just 5 words in my handwriting. "You're not invisible to me." The next morning, it was gone. No response. But I found his breakfast plate rinsed in the sink. The smallest gesture. The tiniest breadcrumb. But when your child disappears emotionally, even breadcrumbs feel like maps. That day at school, I got called into the principal's office. She didn't beat around the bush. "We've had a few parents reach out," she said gently. "They've heard rumors about Evan, about the incident." I nodded. "I understand." "And unfortunately," she continued, "a few of them are now requesting alternate counselors." It landed like a punch to the chest. "They don't want their kids working with me," she sighed. "Some feel there's a conflict. Others are just concerned." I went home that evening and cried into a hand towel in the bathroom with the fan running, not because I lost a client, but because I felt like I was losing my identity. I had built my life around helping other people's kids. Now I couldn't even help my own. That night, Evan came out of his room. It was past 10 p.m. I was half asleep on the couch. He stood in the doorway, awkward like a guest in his own home. "I didn't mean to mess things up for you," he said. I sat up. "You didn't mess anything up. You're not a mistake." He stared at the floor. "You're gonna lose your job." "I might?" He blinked. That hit him harder than I expected. "But I'd rather lose my job," I said, "than lose you." He looked at me. Really looked at me. And for the first time in weeks I saw him. Not the scared kid trying to be someone he wasn't. Not the son of a criminal. Not the stranger I kept projecting all my fears onto. Just Evan. And that gave me hope. A flicker. But still hope. The first time Evan asked about his father, he was 8 years old. We were at a used bookstore digging through a bin of children's comics. He pulled out one about a superhero with a missing dad, and just casually, without even looking up, he said, "Why don't I have a dad like everyone else?" I remember the sound of my heart folding in on itself. I told him the softest version of the truth. That his dad had made some bad choices. That he couldn't be part of our lives. That it wasn't Evan's fault. He nodded. Didn't cry. Just went back to flipping through the comic. But I knew better than to think that was the end of it. Children don't forget the unanswered spaces in their lives. They just learn how to walk around them. Now, nearly a decade later, the shadow of his father was back, not in a phone call or a letter, but in Evan's reflection, in the way he avoided my eyes, in the way he carried shame like it belonged to him. It was a Tuesday when I found him in the garage, sitting on the cement floor back against the dryer. No music, no phone, just still. "Hey," I said gently. He didn't move. I sat down across from him, knees bent, trying to match his quiet. After a moment, he said, "Do you think being messed up runs in the blood?" My breath caught. "I don't believe in curses," I said. He didn't look at me. "But you do believe in patterns." I couldn't lie. "I do." Then, how do I not become him? That question. It rattled inside me like a stone in an empty glass. Evan's father, Miguel, had started small. Late credit card payments, excuses. Then came the petty theft at work, tools from the garage, phones left on desks. I found out about it not from him, but from the police report they handed me after he was arrested. He never called to explain, never showed up in court. He disappeared like a bad dream you wake up sweating from. And now, all these years later, my son had stolen something too. And he hated himself for it more than I ever could. "Your father didn't just steal," I said slowly. "He hid. He never told the truth. He let shame rot him from the inside." "You're not hiding." He looked at me, then a flash of disbelief in his eyes. "Yes, I am." "Not from me," I said. "Not now." His throat worked like he was trying not to cry. "You don't know what it's like. Everyone expects me to be bad. Because of him." He nodded. "Some kids at school, they joke. Say I'm just another Reyes screw-up, that I'll be in cuffs by graduation." I wanted to scream. Instead, I just said, "That's not your name. That's his. You get to choose who you are." But I could see how heavy the name was, how it clung to him like tar. And I realized something I hadn't before. This shoplifting incident wasn't a rebellion. It wasn't boredom. It wasn't even peer pressure, not entirely. It was confirmation bias. He believed what everyone had whispered for years, that he'd end up just like Miguel. So one day, maybe he decided to test it. Just to see how far he'd fall. And when he got away with it, at least for a moment, I think that scared him more than getting caught. Because it meant he could. And that's where the danger lived. I wanted to wrap him in armor. I wanted to scream at the world that my boy was not his father. That one mistake didn't define him. But I couldn't fight every battle for him. He had to stand in the storm and decide. Later that night, I pulled a box from the back of my closet. I hadn't opened it in years. Inside were court documents, a faded photo of Miguel holding Evan as a baby, and the one letter Miguel had ever written us, never sent, never finished. I took it to Evan's room. He was lying in bed reading. I held it out. "What's this?" "Your father's letter? You should read it and decide for yourself who he was, not just who I said he was." He took it, slowly. "I don't want to be like him," he whispered. "You're not," I said. "But even if you were, you'd still have a choice." He read the letter that night. I heard him crying through the wall. And I didn't go in, not because I didn't want to, but because that cry wasn't for comforting. It was a release, a shedding. And in that moment, I realized this wasn't just about shoplifting anymore. This was about lineage, about identity, about a boy standing in a house that used to feel safe holding a mirror to a man he barely remembered and saying, "No, not me." The next morning, Evan came downstairs. His hoodie was off. His eyes were tired but calm. He poured himself a bowl of cereal, sat across from me, and said, "I think I need to talk to someone." I blinked. "Like, a counselor?" He nodded. "Not just you, someone else." And just like that, something opened. The armor cracked, not with weakness, but with willingness. To face it, to fight it, to change it. And that was the first time since the mall that I let myself believe we might be okay. Not perfect, not fixed, but okay. It started with a number I didn't recognize. I was folding laundry, the dryer humming behind me when my phone buzzed. The area code was local. I almost let it go to voicemail, but something in my gut told me to answer. "Hello, is this Olivia Reyes?" The voice was clipped, businesslike. "Yes. Who's this?" "This is Dana Ward. I'm calling on behalf of the West Mall Business District Security Division." My heart dipped into my stomach. "I'm following up on the incident involving your son Evan that took place at our mall last weekend." I held the phone tighter. He returned the item. "No one pressed charges. I'm aware. We reviewed the footage and noted that you intervened appropriately. However," she paused long enough for me to feel it in my bones. "Due to protocol, the video was archived and circulated to necessary stakeholders for liability coverage." What stakeholders? The store manager, mall legal, and unfortunately, it was flagged by a school board liaison. "Someone recognized your son." My knees nearly gave out. "You're saying," I said slowly, "that the school board saw the footage?" "That's correct." I walked into the hallway, away from the dryer, gripping the phone like it might shatter in my hand. "There's no action being taken at this time," she added, "but you should be aware the footage is now logged, digitally and officially." I closed my eyes. "Thank you for letting me know." "Of course. For what it's worth. I thought you handled the situation with a lot of grace." I hung up without responding. Because what do you say to that? What does grace matter when your job could be next? I stood in the kitchen, phone still in my hand, laundry half done, staring at the floor like it might give me an answer. For 12 years, I'd helped students make better choices. Now my own son's worst choice had landed in the inboxes of the very people who could ruin both of our futures. It wasn't just about Evan anymore. It was about me, my credibility, my reputation. The woman who gave advice for a living with a shoplifter for a son. I didn't tell Evan right away. I needed time to think, to figure out if telling him would help or crush him. But he knew something was wrong. That night, he hovered in the hallway, glancing in at me as I sat at the table, staring at my untouched dinner. "Mom," he said softly. I looked up. "Did I ruin something?" I didn't lie. "Yes." His face crumpled just for a second. But then he composed himself the way teenage boys do, fists clenched, jaw tight, body turning to stone. I stood up. "Evan, come here." He walked over slowly, shoulders hunched. I placed my hands on either side of his face, made him look at me. "You didn't ruin me, but you did ruin something I've built for a long time." He swallowed. "I'm sorry." I nodded. "That's not enough." "I know." And somehow, that made me trust him more. Because he knew. The next day at work, I got pulled into the principal's office again. She was kind, thoughtful, but concerned. "Olivia, the board is aware. There's no official reprimand, but there's going to be talk." I nodded. "I can take time off," I offered. She tilted her head. "You think that will help?" "I think disappearing would make it worse." She smiled sadly. "That's why you're good at what you do." I tried not to cry. At home that evening, Evan surprised me. He was at the kitchen table when I got in his phone, face down, a piece of paper in front of him. "A letter. I want to give this to them," he said. "To who?" "The store, the manager." I sat down, read it. It wasn't perfect. The grammar was messy. The sentences were choppy. But it was real. He owned what he did. Explained that he wasn't trying to steal something expensive, he just wanted to impress the kids from school, who always made him feel small. He ended it with, "I don't expect forgiveness. I just wanted you to hear me say, I'm sorry." And that's when I decided we weren't going to let this be the final chapter. The next day, I made a call to the mall manager. "Could we come by? My son wants to speak with you." There was silence on the line. Then, "You want him to apologize in person?" "Yes." "That okay?" "Yeah, that's more than okay." We picked Saturday. I didn't tell Evan how terrified I was. Of the crowd. Of the whispers. Of seeing someone I knew. But we walked in anyway. Together. Side by side. Into the same store where everything started, not to hide from it, but to face it. The fluorescent lights of the mall had never felt so unforgiving. Evan walked slightly ahead of me, shoulders squared, face tight, with something between courage and dread. He clutched the folded letter in his right hand like it was a shield or maybe a confession. We were walking back into the exact store where it happened. The place where my son had slipped something into his hoodie, and where I had realized I no longer recognized the boy I raised. The store manager stood by the counter, arms folded, mid-40s, tired eyes. Not unkind, but wary, like a man who'd seen too many teenagers pretend they were sorry just to avoid consequences. Evan stopped in front of him. The manager raised an eyebrow. "I believe you wanted to speak with me." Evan nodded. "Yes, sir." And then, without me prompting him, without even glancing in my direction, he unfolded the letter with trembling hands and started reading. "I took something from this store last week," he said, voice cracking slightly. "A phone case. I didn't get caught. But my mom saw me, and I put it back. I thought that was the end of it." He paused, cleared his throat. But it wasn't. Because doing the wrong thing doesn't end just because no one calls the police. It ends when you own it. I felt my eyes burn. "I didn't steal because I wanted stuff," he continued. "I did it because I wanted to feel like I mattered. Like I wasn't invisible. But I hurt people in the process. I hurt my mom. I hurt myself. I hurt this store." He folded the paper. "I just wanted to say I'm sorry. Not to get anything back. Just to tell the truth. Because I think I forgot how." The store was quiet. A couple of customers nearby had stopped pretending not to listen. The manager studied Evan for a long moment. And then he said, "You know how many kids walk in here? Steal, get caught, and act like it's a joke." Evan didn't answer. The manager leaned forward. "You're the first one who's ever come back." Then he looked at me. "I don't know what kind of mom you are, but clearly you're doing something right." I swallowed hard. "I try," I said. We walked out of the store into the wide-open mall, and something strange happened. People were staring, not whispering, not pointing, just watching. A couple near the pretzel stand nodded at me. A woman I vaguely recognized from school drop-offs gave me a half smile, then looked away. And that's when I realized the story had already made its way around town. Not just the shoplifting, not just the footage, but this, the return, the apology. The part no one expected. At home that evening, I sat at my desk and opened my work email. There it was. A message from a parent, one who had canceled a meeting with me earlier that week. "I saw what you and your son did today. I don't know many people who would have handled it that way. If you're still offering sessions, we'd like to reschedule." I stared at the screen for a long time. Not because of the message itself, but because of the wave of relief I didn't know I'd been holding back. But with the relief came something else. A question I'd been avoiding. What would I have done if he hadn't put it back? Would I have reported him, turned him in, demanded that he face legal consequences? Or would I have protected him, lied for him, covered for him, rewritten the story? The truth is, I didn't know. And that terrified me. Because for the first time, I saw how thin the line is between justice and fear when it's your child on the other end. Later that night, Evan knocked on my bedroom door. "Can I come in?" I nodded. He sat at the edge of the bed, picked at the seam on one of the throw pillows. "Do you think people will forget?" "No," I said. "But I don't think you want them to forget." He looked confused. "Why not?" "Because remembering is how we grow," I said. "What you did today. That's the part they'll talk about. Not what you took, what you faced." He exhaled like the air had been stuck in his lungs all day. Then almost shyly he said, "I think I want to be someone better." I reached out, touched his shoulder. "You already are." But that night, as I lay in bed, I knew things weren't over. Not for him. Not for me. Because the shame hadn't evaporated, it had just changed shape. From silent guilt to visible memory. And that was okay. Because sometimes the things we carry on our backs are the very things that keep us walking forward. There's a moment in every parent's life when you realize that love alone isn't enough. You can love them through sleepless nights, broken curfews, sharp words, and slammed doors. But sometimes love has to set conditions. And that's where I found myself with Evan after the mall apology, standing at the kitchen counter holding a folded slip of paper that would become the start of an ultimatum I never thought I'd give. It was the next morning, Saturday. Rain tapping against the windows like a slow metronome. Evan was on the couch scrolling through his phone. He looked calm, lighter even after the apology, but I was carrying something heavier than either of us had acknowledged. The footage still existed. The school board still had it. And my job, my reputation wasn't safe. Not yet. I'd survived the first wave. But the next one, that depended on what I chose now. I called him into the kitchen. He looked up confused. "What's up?" I held up the paper. "This is a contract." He blinked. "For what?" I laid it flat on the counter. "It's a behavior agreement. Between you and me." He narrowed his eyes. "Like a punishment?" "No," I said. "A commitment." He didn't say anything. I continued. "It outlines 3 things: therapy attendance, digital transparency, and community accountability." He raised an eyebrow. "You want my phone password?" "Yes, random checks. Not to snoop, to protect you. And me." He folded his arms. "You don't trust me." "I'm learning to again," I said quietly. But trust is earned, not gifted. He stared at the paper for a long moment, then said, "And if I don't sign it?" I met his eyes. "Then you don't stay under my roof." The words hung in the air like thunder. His face broke. "You'd kick me out." "No," I said, my voice trembling. "I'd give you a choice." "That's the same thing." I shook my head. "It's the difference between boundaries and control." He stormed out of the kitchen. I didn't follow. Because if I'd softened, then everything we'd fought through, the letter, the apology, the rebuilding, would have meant nothing. I waited. 20 minutes passed. Then 30. Then I heard the door to his room open. He walked back in, still holding the paper. Wordlessly, he signed it, and then, almost defiantly, handed me his phone. "Here, look at whatever you want." I didn't take it. Instead, I said thank you, and handed it back. Later that night, he came into my room again. Same edge of the bed posture, same nervous fingers. "You really would have made me leave." "I don't want a child in this house who doesn't want to grow in it," I said. He looked away. "I do want to grow." "I know," I whispered. "That's why you're still here." The next week was quiet. No drama, no fights. He started therapy. Voluntarily. I didn't ask what they talked about, but I saw the changes, small ones. He helped with groceries, sat at the table longer after dinner, laughed once when I dropped a spoon, and cursed under my breath. And every time I saw a glimpse of the boy I remembered, or the man he might become, I held onto it like a match in the dark. But change never happens without friction. On Thursday, I was pulled aside in the hallway by Ms. Keller, a senior teacher with a penchant for gossip disguised as concern. I heard Evan's little speech at the mall. "Quite the production," she said, sipping her tea. I smiled politely. He meant every word. She tilted her head. "That's sweet. But one good apology doesn't erase a record." I held her gaze. Neither does one mistake define a life. She blinked, taken aback. I walked away before she could respond. And for the first time in weeks, I didn't feel shame. I felt fierce. That night, Evan said something unexpected. "I want to volunteer. At the library or something." I almost choked on my tea. "You do?" He nodded. "Part of the contract, right? Community accountability." I blinked. "I didn't expect you to take that part seriously." He shrugged. "If I'm going to be talked about, might as well give them something good to say." I smiled, a real one. And maybe for the first time since the mall, I let myself believe he's going to make it. Not because of me, but because of him. Still, a part of me stayed cautious, because I knew how slippery trauma could be. How easy it was to relapse not into crime, but into silent shame, self-hatred. So I watched. Not like a guard, but like a gardener, ready to water, to prune, to protect, but also ready to let him grow. Apologies don't erase the past. They just paint over it with a lighter shade. And as much as Evan and I were rebuilding, healing, and relearning each other, the world around us had a different agenda. It started with a laugh. Not Evan's. Someone else's. At the grocery store, a cluster of teenagers near the frozen food aisle. I was grabbing a bag of spinach when I heard one of them say just loud enough to cut through the silence, "Careful, she might pat you down before you leave." The others snickered. I didn't turn around, didn't say a word. But something in me went cold. That week, the whispers picked up. Soft voices in the school hallway. Two parents murmuring outside my office. A student asking me with mock innocence, "Miss Reyes, is it true your son's banned from half the mall?" Evan never heard these things directly. But I did. And they were like paper cuts, small, precise, and relentless. I knew it wasn't just gossip. It was testing. Testing how much shame I could carry before I cracked. Testing whether my son's story was one of redemption, or proof that bad blood runs deep. One afternoon, after a long day of appointments and forced smiles, I came home to find Evan at the kitchen counter. He was making grilled cheese. "I got asked about it again today," he said, flipping the sandwich. My stomach dropped. "By who, history teacher?" "Mr. Rowe." He said, "Heard you had quite the moral awakening at the Apple store." I clenched my jaw. "That's completely inappropriate." Evan shrugged like it didn't matter, but his eyes told the truth. It did. Later in his room, I found him sitting on the floor, headphones on, scrolling through comments on a local community Facebook page. Someone had posted a vague story, saw a teenage boy apologize in the middle of West Mall last weekend. Made me tear up. We need more parents like this. But the comments sound staged. Another criminal in training. The apple never falls far. I knelt beside him. "Don't read those," I said gently. He looked at me. "But they're talking about me." "I know," I said. "That doesn't make them right." He stared back at the screen for another few seconds before closing the app. Not because it didn't hurt, but because he chose not to give it more oxygen. That night, I sat on my porch in the dark, sipping cold tea, trying to make peace with a world that loves to watch people rise but loves even more to see them fall. And I realized, there's no silence louder than judgment in a small town. The next day, something shifted. It was Evan's weekly therapy session. When he came home, he dropped his bag and said, "She told me I should confront the story head-on." I blinked. "What do you mean?" She asked if I'd ever thought about owning it. Like, publicly? At school? I stared at him. "Are you saying what I think you're saying? I think I want to speak at the assembly," he said. I sat down slowly. "Evan, that's a lot. You don't owe anyone that." "I know," he said. "But maybe I owe it to myself." He spent the whole weekend writing. Not a speech, a story. His story. What led him to steal. What it felt like to be caught. What it cost. What it taught him. He didn't sugarcoat anything, and when he practiced reading it out loud to me, I could barely breathe. "I thought being tough meant being untouchable," he said. "But now I know it means admitting when you're wrong and letting people see you anyway." That line gutted me, because that was a lesson I hadn't even fully learned myself. Monday morning came. The principal approved it. The counselor me endorsed it with shaking hands. And Evan stood in front of the auditorium of 300 students and faculty, voice steady, hands only slightly trembling, and read every word. He didn't ask for sympathy. He asked for accountability. And in doing so, he flipped the story from scandal to something braver. When he stepped off stage, the applause wasn't thunderous, but it was real. And afterward, a few students came up. That was brave man. Respect. Took guts. Even Mr. Rowe stopped him in the hallway. "Good talk," he said. "I was wrong about you." Evan didn't gloat, didn't smile. just nodded and kept walking, like someone who'd left a version of himself behind. That night over dinner, he said, "I don't feel proud. Just clear." I nodded. Sometimes clarity is the closest thing to peace. He looked at me and asked something I wasn't expecting. "Do you think Dad could have changed?" I swallowed. "Maybe," I said. "If he'd had what you just did, the courage to face himself in front of a crowd." Evan was quiet for a moment. Then he said, "I'm glad I'm not him." And I believed him. We had gone over the fact so many times. He took a phone case. He got caught. He apologized. But even after the assembly, even after the letter and the therapy and the quiet between us had softened, there was one question I still hadn't asked. The one that curled at the edges of every conversation, but I'd never had the stomach to push through. Why did you do it? Not the surface reasons. Not, "I felt invisible." Not, "They made fun of me." Not, "I wanted to feel cool." But why? Why that day? Why that store? Why that thing? It was a week later on a Wednesday night. We were in the garage organizing the old boxes I'd ignored for years. It was quiet work, the kind where conversation slips in sideways. I handed him a bin of holiday lights and said, "You always hated this stuff." He grinned faintly. "Still do." I smiled. And then, before I could stop myself, I asked it. "Evan, why that phone case?" He looked up, not startled, just honest. "Because it was dumb," he said. I frowned. "What do you mean?" He sat on the edge of a workbench. It wasn't expensive. It wasn't locked up. It was just sitting there like it didn't matter. I waited. He continued. And I think part of me thought, if I stole something that easy and no one noticed, maybe I'd feel like I had some kind of power. The word power hit me harder than I expected. "You felt powerless." He nodded. "Yeah, all the time." He explained slowly, like peeling a story off his own ribs. There was a group of guys at school. Not bullies, not exactly. Worse than that, they were cool. They had money. They dressed sharp. They had older siblings who drove them to parties. Girls laughed a little harder at their jokes. Teachers gave them the benefit of the doubt. Evan said he didn't want to be them, but he wanted them to see him. And one day, one of them made a joke in front of the others. "Hey Reyes, you got that sticky-fingered gene right, like father, like son." They all laughed. Even Evan chuckled, pretending it was fine. But later it stayed with him, and somewhere deep inside a twisted idea formed. If they already think I'm a thief, why not prove them right? Not because he wanted to be like his father, but because it was the only way he could reclaim the narrative, control it, own it, use it before it used him. "So you stole the case," I said slowly to make the insult. "True." He shrugged. "If I was going to be branded that way, I figured I'd choose when and how it happened." That kind of logic, it chilled me. Not because it was irrational, but because it was familiar. I remembered being a teenager once. Not shoplifting, not rebelling outwardly, but dimming myself. Letting people label me things. I wasn't bossy, bitter, uptight just to keep the peace. There's a strange kind of comfort in proving people right even when it hurts, because it's easier than fighting every day to prove them wrong. "I wish you'd told me," I said quietly. I didn't know how he replied. It didn't feel big enough. I touched his hand. "Everything you feel is big enough." We sat in silence after that. A garage full of Christmas boxes and broken fans and unspoken truths. And I realized he hadn't stolen out of greed, or rebellion, or anger. He stole because he was drowning in a version of himself that everyone else had decided for him. And for one terrible moment, taking that case made him feel like he wasn't drowning. That night, I found an old notebook in my closet. It was Evan's from when he was 9. He'd filled it with sketches of superheroes, but not the usual kind. These were regular heroes. One was a crossing guard with laser vision. Another was a janitor who could erase bullies with his mop. And on the last page was Power Boy. His power. He sees people when they feel invisible and makes them feel strong again. I brought it to him. He smiled when he saw it. I forgot about this. You didn't, I said. You just became him. He looked down, then back at me. I think I want to draw again. You should, I said. The world could use more Power Boys. The next morning, I emailed the local library about a mural project they were organizing. Got a teenage artist who might want in, I wrote. He used to steal spotlights. Now he's making his own. We had gone over the facts so many times. He took a phone case. He got caught. He apologized. But even after the assembly, even after the letter and the therapy and the quiet between us had softened, there was one question I still hadn't asked. The one that curled at the edges of every conversation, but I'd never had the stomach to push through. Why did you do it? Not the surface reasons. Not, I felt invisible. Not, they made fun of me. Not, I wanted to feel cool. But why? Why that day? Why that store? Why that thing? It was a week later on a Wednesday night. We were in the garage organizing the old boxes I'd ignored for years. It was quiet work, the kind where conversation slips in sideways. I handed him a bin of holiday lights and said, "You always hated this stuff." He grinned faintly. "Still do." I smiled, and then before I could stop myself, I asked it, "Evan, why that phone case?" He looked up, not startled, just honest. "Because it was dumb," he said. I frowned. "What do you mean?" He sat on the edge of a workbench. "It wasn't expensive. It wasn't locked up. It was just sitting there like it didn't matter." I waited. He continued. "And I think part of me thought, if I stole something that easy and no one noticed, maybe I'd feel like I had some kind of power." The word power hit me harder than I expected. "You felt powerless?" He nodded. "Yeah, all the time." He explained slowly, like peeling a story off his own ribs. There was a group of guys at school. Not bullies, not exactly. Worse than that, they were cool. They had money. They dressed sharp. They had older siblings who drove them to parties. Girls laughed a little harder at their jokes. Teachers gave them the benefit of the doubt. Evan said he didn't want to be them, but he wanted them to see him. And one day, one of them made a joke in front of the others. "Hey Reyes, you got that sticky finger gene right, like father, like son." They all laughed. Even Evan chuckled, pretending it was fine. But later it stayed with him, and somewhere deep inside a twisted idea formed. If they already think I'm a thief, why not prove them right? Not because he wanted to be like his father, but because it was the only way he could reclaim the narrative, control it, own it, use it before it used him. "So you stole the case?" I said slowly to make the insult. "True." He shrugged. "If I was going to be branded that way, I figured I'd choose when and how it happened." That kind of logic, it chilled me. Not because it was irrational, but because it was familiar. I remembered being a teenager once, not shoplifting, not rebelling outwardly, but dimming myself, letting people label me things I wasn't: bossy, bitter, uptight, just to keep the peace. There's a strange kind of comfort in proving people right even when it hurts, because it's easier than fighting every day to prove them wrong. "I wish you'd told me," I said quietly. I didn't know how he replied. It didn't feel big enough. I touched his hand. "Everything you feel is big enough." We sat in silence after that. A garage full of Christmas boxes and broken fans and unspoken truths. And I realized he hadn't stolen out of greed, or rebellion, or anger. He stole because he was drowning in a version of himself that everyone else had decided for him. And for one terrible moment, taking that case made him feel like he wasn't drowning. That night, I found an old notebook in my closet. It was Evan's from when he was 9. He'd filled it with sketches of superheroes, but not the usual kind. These were regular heroes. One was a crossing guard with laser vision. Another was a janitor who could erase bullies with his mop. And on the last page was Power Boy. His power. He sees people when they feel invisible and makes them feel strong again. I brought it to him. He smiled when he saw it. I forgot about this. You didn't, I said. You just became him. He looked down, then back at me. I think I want to draw again. You should, I said. The world could use more Power Boys. The next morning, I emailed the local library about a mural project they were organizing. Got a teenage artist who might want in, I wrote. He used to steal spotlights. Now he's making his own. When your child finally opens the locked door in their heart, you expect fireworks, drama, emotion. But when Evan finally told me why he took that phone case, it was quiet. Just 2 people in a car engine off parked outside the library where he'd just finished his volunteer shift. The late afternoon sun spilled through the windshield, catching dust in the air like floating ash. I turned to him and asked gently, "Do you know what made you do it?" He didn't look at me, just stared out the window and said, "I wanted to matter." It wasn't about the phone case. It wasn't about the thrill. It wasn't even about the kids who dared him, at least not entirely. It was about something deeper. A slow erosion of self-worth. The kind you don't notice until it caves in from the inside. He explained everything in pieces, how for months there had been this group of juniors, loud, magnetic, merciless, the kind of boys who wore arrogance like cologne. They'd let Evan orbit them like a stray moon, but never let him in. Every day they joked about me, he said. Not in a bullying way. More like I was their pet. I felt something twist in my chest. Did you want to be like them? I asked. No, he said. I just wanted them to stop looking through me. He told me about the pressure, the offhand remarks. Man, you walk like you're scared of your own shadow. Didn't your dad get locked up? Bet you've got sticky fingers too. And eventually, one of them tossed out a challenge. A joke, maybe. Maybe not. If you want to sit with us, go prove you're not so soft. Evan didn't even respond, but the seed was planted. And a week later, standing in that Apple Store, heart pounding and sweat prickling under his hoodie, he slipped a $40 case into his jacket and walked out. No one noticed. Not even the cashier. But I had. He looked at me in the car, eyes wet but not crying. I didn't even want the case. I just wanted to be seen. And after you caught me, I finally was. But not the way I wanted. I didn't speak for a moment. Because what do you say to that? When your son confesses that he'd rather betray himself than keep being invisible, I used to think he said slowly that I had to be loud to matter, or dangerous, or just someone else. But after I got caught, I realized something worse. What I didn't know who I was without the noise. He rested his head back against the seat. I don't want to be like that anymore. You won't be, I said softly. You already aren't. We sat in silence for a few minutes, the library lights flickering on behind us. Then I asked, "Why didn't you tell me any of this before?" He gave a half laugh. Because I thought you already had enough to deal with. Because I didn't want to add to your stress. Because I didn't think you'd understand. I swallowed. You know, I said you don't have to protect me from you. That's not how this works. He smiled faintly. You're scary when you're mad, though. Only when someone steals from Apple. He laughed, really laughed. And it was the first time in weeks that I heard it, not a polite chuckle, but the deep belly kind that used to echo through our house when he was still little. Back home, he surprised me again. He opened his laptop at the dining table, pulled out his planner, and said, "I'm thinking of writing about this. For my senior capstone." I raised an eyebrow. The shoplifting. He nodded. Not just that. The why. The pressure. How easy it is to lose yourself when you think everyone already expects the worst. I blinked. That's incredibly honest. He shrugged. What's the point in lying anymore? And that was it. The shift. The moment I knew we had crossed a line that wasn't going to blur again. That night, I opened my own journal. It had been collecting dust in the drawer for months, the same drawer I'd once kept pacifiers and permission slips. I wrote, "He doesn't need to be perfect. He just needs to be seen by me first, always. The rest will come." And somehow, in writing that, I realized something even bigger. This story, our story, had never been about a theft. It had always been about visibility, about a boy who thought he had to disappear in order to be accepted, and a mother who thought loving him was enough until she realized she had to see him truly before the world did. There are two kinds of crying: the kind you let others see, and the kind you save for locked doors and cold tile floors. Mine happened in the staff bathroom. It was a Wednesday, mid-morning. There were no tears when Evan confessed. None when he signed the contract. Not even when I watched him read that letter in the middle of the mall. But that morning I cracked because of a sandwich. I had just finished a session with a sophomore whose parents were divorcing. She cried for the full 45 minutes while I sat beside her, steady, composed, telling her she would be okay. After she left, I walked to the staff lounge, opened the fridge, reached for my lunch. It was gone. Not stolen, just mistakenly eaten by someone else. A sticky note left behind read, "Oops. Thought this was mine. Will replace tomorrow." K. A stupid, thoughtless mistake. But that was all it took. I turned, walked calmly down the hallway, entered the farthest staff restroom, locked the door, and melted. I slid to the floor, back against the stall, hand clutched to my mouth to muffle the sobs. It wasn't about the sandwich. It wasn't even about the gossip or the judgment or the strain of pretending everything was fine. It was about the cost. The invisible cost of holding everyone else's weight while quietly drowning in your own. I thought about how many students I had helped over the years, how many I'd comforted, supported, written letters for. But the moment my son made a mistake, it was like all my work, my hours, my late-night lesson plans. None of it mattered anymore. I had become a symbol of failure, not just as a counselor, as a mother. A knock came at the door. "Olivia. You okay?" It was Lorna, the school nurse. I cleared my throat, wiped my face, forced calm into my voice. "Yeah, just taking a minute." She paused. "Want me to cover your next session?" "No, I'm okay. Really. Because the truth was, I couldn't afford to fall apart. Not where it could be seen." Later that day, I got a message from the principal. "Board has decided not to pursue review of your license. No action required. But FYI, they're watching." Watching. Like I was under a microscope. A case study. When I got home that evening, Evan noticed something was off. "Bad day," I nodded, too tired to lie. He hesitated, then said, "You ever wish you hadn't had me?" The question hit like a sucker punch. What, I said sharply. "I mean," he rubbed the back of his neck, "if I hadn't been here, you wouldn't be dealing with all this crap. Your job, your reputation, everything." I walked over, stood in front of him. "No, I never wish that." He didn't believe me, not fully. So I added, "You didn't ruin my life, Evan. You revealed what needed to change." He frowned. "What does that mean?" "It means I built everything to look strong from the outside," I said, "but I never gave myself room to fall apart." He looked surprised. You're like, unbreakable." "No one is," I whispered. He was quiet. "Then I saw you crying last week." My stomach dropped. "When?" "On the porch. You didn't know I was watching." I didn't speak. I thought about coming out, but I didn't know if you'd want me to. I swallowed. "I would've." He nodded slowly. Then, barely above a whisper, I was scared I broke you. I pulled him into a hug. Tight. The kind of hug I used to give him after nightmares when he was small, and still believed I could protect him from everything. And maybe in some way I still could. But not by pretending to be perfect. By showing him that healing isn't about hiding the cracks. It's about owning them. That night, I wrote another line in my journal. Sometimes the person who needs grace most is the one giving it to everyone else. And with that, I let myself off the hook. Just a little. Because yes, I had broken down. But in breaking, I found something deeper. Not weakness, but the kind of strength that rebuilds. There are numbers you memorize once and never forget, even when every part of you wants to. His was one of them. I hadn't dialed it in over 9 years. But on a Thursday morning, with my finger hovering over the call button and my heart pounding like a second pulse in my throat, I did it. I called Evan's father. His name is Marcus, the man who made Evan then unmade himself. He wasn't always the villain. When we were young, he was bright, charismatic, clever, sharp with words, and quicker with a laugh. But something in him cracked after Evan was born. At first it was just restlessness, then secrets, then theft. Small things at first: time card fraud at work, borrowing money he never repaid. Then the bigger thing, the arrest, possession with intent, a 5-year sentence, and a decision I made not out of revenge, but survival, to walk away. With Evan. For good. The phone rang twice before he answered. I hadn't expected that. Olivia. His voice aged gravelly, unfamiliar. I cleared my throat. Yeah, it's me. A long pause. You okay? I nearly laughed. That's not why I'm calling. Another pause. He must have been bracing for bad news. It's about Evan, I said. I think he needs to talk to you. He didn't say anything for a full 10 seconds. Then quietly, is he okay? He's learning, I said. He made a mistake. A big one. But he's working through it. Is he in trouble? He stole something. Returned it. Faced it. Owned it. Another silence. Then damn. Yeah. I told him what happened. Not the sanitized version, the real one. I told him about the mall, the apology, the fallout, the whispers. I didn't expect sympathy. I just wanted presence. You don't have to be a father, I said. Not if you're not ready. But I think he deserves to see who you really are. He exhaled slowly. You sure about that? No, I admitted. But I'm sure that silence isn't helping. They talked 2 nights later. I stayed in the kitchen while Evan took the call from his bedroom. The door was cracked open just enough for me to hear snatches of conversation. His voice was flat at first, tense, guarded. But then, laughter. Real laughter. A small, surprised chuckle that broke through like sunshine after a storm. When he came out, he didn't say much. He didn't try to make excuses. And I knew that meant everything. A week later, Marcus wrote Evan a letter. He left it in my mailbox with no return address. It said, "You did something I never had the guts to do. You faced your mistake while you still had time to fix it. I'm proud of you, even if I didn't earn the right to say that. But I'm saying it anyway." Evan folded the letter and put it in his wallet. Didn't speak. Didn't need to. That call didn't change everything. But it changed something. It anchored Evan's identity to more than just a ghost. It gave him a mirror, a warning, a wound, a possible future both to fear and to reject. We talked about it days later. He said I don't hate him. I used to. But now, I think I just didn't want to be like him. You're not, I said. But I could have been. He whispered. If you hadn't stopped me? I shook my head. No. You stopped yourself. Evan started writing again after that. Poetry of all things. Angry at first, then tender, then searching. He left one on the kitchen table for me to find. Inheritance. They say I look like him, the jawline, the temper, the hands. But if I got the fire, I also got the match. And now I get to decide whether I burn or build. I cried when I read it. Not because it was perfect, but because it meant he understood. We are not doomed to become the worst of where we come from. We get to choose. And Evan had. The envelope was thin. Official. When I found it in my school mailbox, my hands didn't tremble, they tightened. I already knew what it was. An invitation, but with teeth. The school board was calling a closed session meeting to discuss community perception and counselor ethics. Translation me. It wasn't a surprise. Even after Evan's public apology, even after his volunteering, his therapy, his written reflections, some people still wanted blood. Some parents had complained anonymously. A few believed I had encouraged his confession to soften the blow to my career. One even claimed it was all staged for sympathy. That stung worst of all. Because if they could have seen what it cost us, what it took, they'd know there was no performance here. Only pain. And choice. And growth. But of course it's easier to point at someone else's wound than examine your own. I didn't tell Evan about the meeting right away. He had a math test, college prep, a library shift. I wanted him to have a few days of normal, a few days where he didn't carry the weight of my consequences. The meeting was held in the conference room behind the board offices. 4 members, 2 staff representatives, 1 empty chair for me. They didn't waste time. No small talk, no smiles, just folders, questions, eyes. Ms. Reyes, do you feel your handling of your son's situation compromised your professional integrity? No. Do you feel you maintained appropriate boundaries between your personal and professional responsibilities? I do. I kept all interventions within the family outside of school hours. I disclosed the incident immediately. I sought no special treatment. One of them leaned forward. And yet, your son gave a speech in our auditorium. He requested that opportunity, I said. It was approved by administration. Not by me. Another board member, a woman named Marla, tapped her pen. Your son's actions reflect on you, she said. Fair or not? I nodded. I know. Do you feel you're still respected by the student body? I met her eyes. I think the ones who've made mistakes feel safer with me now than ever. They didn't respond to that. Just scribbled notes. The tension in the room was suffocating, not explosive, but surgical. Clean, polite, and lethal. Then the principal, bless her, finally spoke. Olivia is one of the most effective counselors we've ever had. If anything, her transparency in this situation has modeled exactly what we teach: accountability, resilience, emotional literacy. She's also human, she added. And that matters. The final question came like a final blow. If your son were to make another mistake, how would you handle it differently? I paused, then answered carefully. I'd still hold him accountable. I'd still insist on ownership. But next time, I'd also be gentler with myself. The meeting ended with no verdict. We'll notify you within 5 business days, they said. I thanked them, walked out with my back straight, and only let myself cry in the car. When I got home, Evan was waiting on the porch. He looked at me. You okay? Yeah. He didn't believe me. You had that look again, like you're smiling with your mouth but not your eyes. I exhaled, sat beside him. They're deciding if I get to keep my job. He was quiet for a long moment. Then, because of me. Because of both of us, I said. Because people still think parenting is a guarantee instead of a gamble. He glanced at me. What happens if they let you go? I looked at the sky. I'll still be your mom. The next morning, I got the email. No disciplinary action, but also no apology. Just a note that the matter was closed. Done. I read it twice before forwarding it to my principal. then closed my laptop, stood up, and walked to Evan's room. He was asleep, mouth slightly open, arms tangled in blankets. I didn't wake him. Just watched him breathe, this boy who had dragged me through fire and unknowingly shown me how to walk through it without burning. And I thought, let them watch. Let them whisper. We made it through anyway. What the town didn't see were the nights I stayed up watching Evan breathe, not because I feared he'd leave, but because I feared he was drifting away while still here. They didn't see the journal pages stained with ink and frustration. The therapy receipts I kept folded like origami in a drawer no one opened. The way I flinched every time my phone buzzed, afraid it was another parent, another colleague, another stranger with something to say. They saw the headline, not the backstory. They saw a teen who shoplifted and a mother who was supposed to be better. They didn't see a system that expected perfection while punishing humanity. What the town didn't see was Evan folding laundry with me in the living room, sharing fragments of poetry he'd never let anyone else read. They didn't hear the conversations we had in the car parked outside school about anxiety and masculinity and what it means to grow up afraid of your own reflection. They didn't feel the small seismic shift of him putting his phone down to ask how my day was, or how the first time I cried in front of him, really cried, he didn't flinch. He just held my hand. They didn't see us rebuilding, not with bricks and blueprints, with glances, with silence, with shared meals that didn't end in slammed doors. There's this false idea that redemption comes with trumpets and gold stars, but in truth, it arrives quietly, in the form of an ordinary Sunday afternoon when you realize you haven't had to brace yourself all day. No tension, no guarded smiles. Just peace, strange and unfamiliar, like an old friend returning from exile. That month, Evan was invited to read one of his poems at a youth event hosted by the local library. The theme was mistakes and mirrors. He was hesitant. What if someone heckles me, he asked. Then you'll keep reading, I said. And you'll leave stronger than they will. He bit his lip. What if I freeze? Then you'll pause, I said, and start again. And what if they don't clap? Then we'll go get pancakes afterward. I smiled, and you'll know it still mattered. He read a piece called Unfold. I stole a thing that didn't belong to me, thinking it would build me, but it broke me in the right places. I returned it, and somewhere along the way, I returned to myself. Silence after he finished. Not from discomfort, from reverence. Then applause. Not thunderous, but enough. Afterward, a younger boy, maybe 13, came up and whispered to him, I did something bad last month. I thought I was alone. Evan didn't say anything profound. He just said, you're not. And I stood in the back of the room watching him offer what I'd once offered others, and I thought, he's becoming the kind of man I would have trusted with my broken parts. What the town didn't see was that none of this was about a crime. It was about a choice. The choice to spiral or rise, to hide or heal, and to forgive not just others but the version of yourself who didn't know better. They didn't see the hard days, the backslides, the anxiety that came and went like weather. They only saw a single act frozen in time. But I saw the boy behind it thawing, and slowly, surely stepping into the warmth. I didn't expect to cry that day. Not in public, not in front of students, not while holding a cup of lukewarm coffee in the high school auditorium lobby. But Evan, my son, managed to break me open with just 3 sentences and a microphone. It was senior recognition day. Parents were invited. Teachers, administrators, and a sea of restless students filled the room with chatter and artificial applause. Each senior had the option to dedicate a short message to someone, a mentor, a coach, a friend. Most were sweet, a few funny. Then Evan's name was called. He walked to the podium with a calm I hadn't seen in him before. Not fake confidence. Rootedness. The kind that comes after walking through fire barefoot and realizing you still have feet. He adjusted the mic, then looked out at the crowd. He didn't look for me. Not yet. Just breathed. Then he said, "Some of you know who I am. Some of you think you do. I'm the kid who messed up, who stole, who had to stand in front of strangers and admit it. And I'm okay with that. Because that's part of my story now, and it's not the end. But this is for the person who never let that moment become my definition." Now he looked straight at me, eyes locked, voice steady, to my mom, who didn't bail me out but didn't leave me behind either, who let me break, and then helped me rebuild. Everything I do next, the good I try to give, that's you. That's when it hit. No warning, no gentle sting, just tears. Hot and fast. Right there in the middle of the lobby, surrounded by applause and stunned silence and whispering students. I cried. A teacher next to me placed a hand on my shoulder. Another gave me a tissue. Neither said anything. They didn't have to. Because in that moment, every rumor, every whisper, every accusatory glance from the past year, it all melted into irrelevance. I wasn't the counselor under scrutiny. I wasn't the mother of the shoplifter. I was just seen fully by the person who once felt invisible. Afterward, Evan found me by the vending machines. He looked nervous, like maybe he'd gone too far. "Was that okay?" he asked. I nodded, still holding the tissue. "That was more than okay." He grinned. "I didn't mean to make you cry." "Yes, you did." He laughed. "Yeah, a little." We walked out into the parking lot and I realized something strange. For the first time in months, I wasn't bracing for what came next. There was no storm brewing, no battle to prepare for. Just sunlight. And my son beside me. And a peace that didn't come from perfection, but from surviving realness together. That night, he left a note on the fridge. "Thanks for not giving up on me, even when I kind of gave up on myself. I don't say it enough, but I'm proud to be your kid." It wasn't poetry. But it didn't need to be. Because sometimes the most powerful words are the plain ones, not written for applause, just written to be felt. And I felt them. Every last one. My name is Olivia Reyes. And for the longest time, I thought this story would end in shame. Shame for the choices my son made. Shame for the judgment we endured. Shame for what I thought I'd failed to protect. But I see it now. We weren't broken. We were just becoming. Graduation came in a blink. Rows of caps. The smell of sunblock and folding chairs baking under June heat. Speeches I only half heard. But when they called his name, Evan Reyes, the sound of it carved itself into my chest. He crossed the stage not just as a student or a statistic, but as a survivor of his own worst instincts. A boy who walked into fire and came out self-made. People clapped. Some stood. Some didn't. It didn't matter. He didn't look for them. He looked for me. And I didn't wave. I just nodded once and mouthed, "You did it." We took pictures afterward. The kind of photos you frame not because they're perfect, but because they prove something, that we got through it. Not untouched, not unchanged, but together. Weeks passed. The story faded from town gossip. New scandals took its place, and life resumed its rhythm, quieter, steadier. Evan got a part-time job at a bookstore downtown. He joined a writing group. He started sleeping through the night again. And me, I kept counseling. But I stopped apologizing. For being human. For being imperfect. For raising a son who stumbled and stood anyway. One night, we sat on the back porch, legs stretched out, fireflies blinking lazily around us. He turned to me and asked, "Do you think people still think about what I did?" I sipped my tea. Thought a moment. "Maybe," I said, "but I think what you've done since matters more." He nodded slowly. "Me too." Then added, "You know, I still feel guilty sometimes." I looked at him. "You're allowed to." He blinked. "Aren't you supposed to tell me to let it go?" "No," I said. "You don't have to erase it. Just Don't let it define you. He exhaled like he'd been holding that in. I won't, he said. And that's how it ends. Not with a courtroom, not with punishment, not with perfection. Just a boy who made a mistake, and a mother who stayed. If you're still here listening, thank you. We don't always get to choose the stories people tell about us, but we can choose what comes next. So tell me, have you ever had to rebuild from something others only saw the surface of? Drop your story in the comments. And don't forget to subscribe to Grace's Truth, because the truth, no matter how messy, is always worth telling.